Cowboy wrestling takes on China tonight with Iowa and Nebraska on the schedule as well. UT Martin's not exactly a team to take lightly, and I might have a bone to pick with my locked on peeps. ZERO Cowboys in the top 100? Really? Zero?
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your top stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms and visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at Aldeo State. Today, we get to jump right into this conversation of the Locked On variety. They did put out recently that every host across the country needed to fill out a top 300 list. Naturally, I did include 6 Cowboys on my top 300 list, and I did have a couple Cowboys crack in the top 100. Bryan McCoy, I felt like should have been part of that conversational piece. Josh Ford was another individual that I thought maybe could creep into this designation. Nonetheless, it's not entirely surprising, although it does hurt the soul a little bit to know that there aren't any Cowboys beginning the season in the top 100 list. Texas Tech has a couple. Kansas State has a couple. Iowa State even has a couple. Arizona State has a couple as well. So there are some Big 12 representation in the top 100 list, which I entirely agree with. Dejon Stribling, former Oklahoma State wide receiver, is on the top 100 list, obviously now being at Ole Miss. But whenever you look at this Cowboy squad, I do feel like that Bryan McCoy not being included in the top 100 is a little wild. Whenever he's designated as one of the top 51 linebackers in the country coming into this season, that makes sense. When he's invited to the Shrine Bowl, that is validation that he is that level of a dude. And realistically, if you look at this top 100 list, I highly doubt there's very many, if any, individuals on this list that has accumulated almost 240 tackles in college. Regardless of where they are, what the prognostications say about them, I do understand that there might be some reservations. Haas Haney was another individual that I thought might get some consideration for the top 150-ish style of players because he was so good this previous season as a true freshman that although Josh Hoover was having a 4,000 almost yard season, they still had to find ways to get Haas Haney involved in the game planning. Yes, he doesn't quite have enough passing yards for it to make a whole lot of sense, which is kind of a microcosm of this situation. There might be an opportunity for some Cowboys to crack this list as the season progresses. But coming into it, I guess I kind of get it. Jaleel Johnson was a rotational piece that also dealt with some injuries this previous season, as was Deshaun Brown to some degree. From the wide receiver position, you lose Brendan Presley, which may have been the top guy to be on this list. I do think that it is at all feasible that if Talon Shetron was completely healthy, he would have absolutely been included on this list. And maybe he would have been our best opportunity at actually cracking that top 100 spot. But outside of just Bryan McCoy, you have Trip White coming over from Ole Miss. That's an individual that could make some noise as the season progresses. We've discussed Jalen Davies, the cornerback coming over from UCLA. He was another individual that I submitted as my top 6 for the top 300. And collectively, I think Oklahoma State did bring in enough talent to make this an interesting conversation. Is this finally going to be the emergence of the Zane train? Is this going to be a system where Haas Haney is allowed to flourish? Is this going to be a team that utilizes the 50-50 ball receivers like your Iowa Shotomide-Kings, your Christian Fitzpatricks, your Shamar Rigby's on a regular basis? If so, I think Shamar Rigby would have been another individual that potentially could have been in this conversational piece. Let me know down in the comment section for all you fine folks out here on YouTube. Do you think that it's a little bit of a miss for Oklahoma State not to be tabbed as a top 100 player? And this isn't just Locked On. Obviously, a lot of publications are starting to do something similar, and there aren't any Cowboys that are cracking these lists regardless. But at the end of the day, it's going to take production from this team to equal some dudes on this list. It could be an exciting piece to talk about who could potentially be on this top 100 list this next season. I think defensively, we've got some dudes that can make some things happen. I think even offensively, we've got more than enough weapons to make some things happen as well. I did include Rodney Fields and my top 6 Oklahoma State players to be represented in the top 300 as well. So I do think that at the end of the day, when you look at this Oklahoma State roster from a statistical perspective, then perhaps it doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense to have players on this top 100 preseason. But I do think that at the end of the year, this will be a very interesting conversation to revert back to. Again, you have multiple representatives from multiple teams in the Big 12 on the top 100 list, and I think that is very justifiable. Matter of fact, Oregon had 4 players maybe even top 5 players in the top 100 list. So on paper, it's not even going to be a ball game. But it's inevitable that some of the dudes that are getting overlooked are on this Oklahoma State roster. I think Zaquan Patterson was another individual that I included, primarily because of the words that were spoken about the Miami coaches in regards to his tackling ability and being one of the most pure tacklers in the country as a true freshman. Statistically, though, yes, maybe there's not, an emergence enough yet to justify him being on this list. Who would you have included in the top 100 or even stretch it to 150-ish? Who would have been some of the players that you would have decided that Oklahoma State potentially could have landed up on this list? And more importantly, at the end of the year, is it somebody other than Bryan McCoy that is cracking this list? Are we having a conversation about a J.K. Johnson or a Chendavian Bradley or a Cam Epps or a LaDainian Fields, right? There's a lot of dudes that are emerging already very early on. From an offensive line perspective, you have a veteran coming back in Bob Schick. You have veteran return coming to Oklahoma State and Markel Samuel. So I think we definitely got some guys. Kason Carpenter coming over from Tulsa. But is this completely a surprise? Probably not, right? Production-wise, we get it. If DeJon Stribling would have stayed at Oklahoma State, different story. If Brendan Presley had an additional year, obviously probably a different story. If Ollie Gordon was back, right? These are all players like Nick Martin, like Colin Oliver, that would have likely cracked this list, which is, again, why it's slightly egregious to me to not have Bryan McCoy on here. But I'd also imagine that a lot of the individuals that did the voting, they looked at statistics from, just the Big 12 conference or just the SEC, Big 10, whatever the case may be. They probably didn't look at the scope of what the transfer portal players were going to look like and what somebody like Bryan McCoy has done at a previous stop, because it was at an Akron. But I don't give 13 hoots who you are or where you came from. If you're approaching 240 tackles, that's absolutely ridiculous. And the 6'2", 225-pound designation, that's not bad. Again, the comparison there is going to be Nick Martin, who is set to likely be a starter as a rookie in San Fran if everything continues to go accordingly. Bryan McCoy could be that level of dude. It's good to see that the Buckus Award watch list believes in that. The Shrine Bowl, a watch list, they obviously believe in that as well. So it's maybe not surprising that there's not a Cowboy on the top 100, but it does hurt the heart a little bit. It's odd. It's odd not having a wide receiver or a running back or a quarterback being on this list. These are new times for Oklahoma State. Spencer Sanders would have been on this list, as would have Ollie Gordon. Recently, Tylan Wallace is an individual that easily would have cracked this list. Brendan Presley, I think, would have as well. So it's weird. Not only having 60 new players and an entirely new staff, but also not having any Cowboys on the top 100 preseason. It's a trying time to be an Oklahoma State Cowboy fan at the moment. But there's a lot of reasons to be excited about the rejuvenation on this roster moving forward. Ladies and gentlemen, we get to talk a little bit about Drip Drop. It's all about staying hydrated, and Drip Drop is the bee's knees when you're trying to do just that. Being out in the coaching realm of things, it is difficult to try to get young dudes to hydrate more and take it more responsible. And if you're trying to stay on top of your hydration routine, Drip Drop is here for you, whether it's workouts, long days on campus, long days at work, or you're just trying to focus to get back to work or back to classes. Hydration is where it all starts, and this is where Drip Drop comes into play. When I'm on top of my hydration, much like you, I'm going to notice everything works better. My energy's better, my mood, my focus, even my skin, it's better. But getting enough fluids every day isn't exactly easy. That's why you're going to absolutely love Drip Drop. That's why my boys out there on the diamond are going to love Drip Drop. It is a doctor-developed and scientifically proven hydration method for fast hydration. It uses the perfect balance of sodium, electrolytes, and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading sports drinks. Right now is your biggest opportunity to get in with Drip Drop. Drip Drop is currently offering our Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just head on over to dripdrop.com. Use the promo code LockedOnCollege, all one word, to get squared away. This is dripdrop.com. Promo code LockedOnCollege, all one word, for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits you hard and football season is among you. And you might want to have a couple beverages with some drip drop behind it to help you the next day. All right, now we're going to talk a little bit about UT Martin. We're not going to do, a diagnosis per se on film or personnel. This is just going to be a little bit more of an overarching view, and that is that you can't necessarily take them lightly. Should Oklahoma State beat them very convincingly? Yes. When you look back at some of their heavy hitter opponents that they've played, like Kansas State recently was able to get a hold of them. It was a 41-10 or something to that effect. Now, they did win their conference. Not only had they won it 5 times, but they've won it 4 years in a row, all under this new head coach. So, not new head coach. He's been here for 18 years. So, he's kind of like a Mike Gundy version of the Ohio Valley Conference. They've won 4 straight conference championships. Last year, they went 9-5. They had a pretty big upset in the first round of the playoffs. They took down 16th-ranked New Hampshire, 41-10, ironically enough. Almost the same score of the Kansas State game, or it may have been like 40-6 or something to that effect. But when you watch the K-State game, it was they'd only given up 2 offensive touchdowns going into the fourth quarter. So Kansas State really didn't run away with that game until the fourth quarter. The first 3 quarters were relatively close. And whenever you have a 9-5 season, obviously that's going to be chalked up as very successful. Their coach, again, been there 18 years. He's the longest tenured coach in the Ohio Valley Conference, Jason Simpson, who's really transformed University of Tennessee Martin since taking over and winning their first Ohio Valley Conference championship in 2026. His overall record as a head coach is 124-94. That puts him pretty close to some of the Big 12 counterparts, right? That puts him pretty close to the Mike Gundy, Kyle Whittingham style of winning percentage. Winning not 8 games a season under Sampson has become pretty commonplace. For the FCS level, he's one of the best in the business. He's won multiple awards, as he should have. The overall conference record is phenomenal. The 5 conference titles is phenomenal. He was the Ohio Valley Coach of the Year multiple times, 2006, 2021. He may have even won it this previous year as well. Sergeant York Trophy, he's won that more times than I can almost count. He's won the Eddie Robinson FCS Coach of the Year. He's been a finalist in 2006, 2012, 2016, and 2021. He was a Region 3 Coach of the Year as well in 2006. Throughout his time as the Skyhawks coach, he's produced 2 draft picks. A couple years ago, they had a wide receiver drafted in the 5th round. Last year, they had another individual drafted in the 7th round. This is not a team that we can take entirely lightly. Again, whenever they play some of the Power 4 level teams, there's a discrepancy, right? We're not going to sit here and pretend otherwise, but they've had 21 players under his tutelage that have won all conference honors. They've had Ohio Valley Offensive Player of the Year in Peyton Logan, Zach Wallace, Nathan Hatchie, Michael Shanahan, Austin Pickett. They've all been Ohio first team all conference along with John H. Ford and Devin Sims. Again, this previous year, they did have a couple big time defensive tackles that did transfer out. They did have the same starting quarterback for a couple seasons. They've got a couple quarterbacks competing right now, including a transfer from Kentucky. So while Oklahoma State should win very comfortably, if you go back and look at that Kansas State game, it was close for a while. It took a little bit of time for Kansas State to kind of figure it out and make some headway going into that fourth quarter. They were able to largely contain Avery Johnson, and they were able to largely contain DJ Giddens. So Oklahoma State's not going to be, projected to absolutely cakewalk this team. Another reason being is I do think that regardless of how long we're going to go with the multiple quarterback system, it's definitely going to be applicable in week 1. Not only does it make the most amount of sense to have Zane Flores and Haas Haney kind of splitting some time in the game, because there's going to be moments where Haas Haney is going to be utilized more so than maybe a Zane Flores. Secondarily, you're not going to want to tip your hand a whole lot to Oregon. So this is going to be as vanilla gets. This is going to be a very condensed version of the playbooks, both offensively and defensively. Why? Because we're not going to want to show Oregon a whole lot. And Oregon's going to be in the same position. The difference there is a lot of film on some of the Oregon dudes that have come in, whether it be Dante Moore previously at UCLA or Barry Alexander at OU and USC. So they've got some of the best dudes. Sadiq, I think, is one of the best, if not the best tight end in the country. So Oregon's got some dudes that they're going to want to kind of keep on the down low for Oklahoma State. But at the end of the day, UT Martin is not exactly a team that can be slept on. And we're familiar with a couple FCS teams giving us fits. South Alabama, they beat us. South Dakota State last year had enough opportunities to potentially make that a very interesting game. And it's not like we won it going away either. So we've had instances, Central Michigan, even though by definition, by the rule book, that was a W, it still counts as a loss. And the Chippewas do consider that one of their biggest wins in their program history. I think it actually is the biggest win on record books in the program history. For those of you that don't recall, there was a last-second Hail Mary style of play, but there was a penalty, and the penalty should have been a 10-second runoff, which would have meant the game was over. But the refs didn't abide by that, and Mike Gundy didn't catch it in time, so they gave the Chippewas an additional play that technically should have never counted, but it is what it is. It doesn't matter. You can't lose those games. Even if they got a bad Bama Jamma and Cooper Rush at quarterback, you still cannot lose those games. And last year, Mark Gronowski, very good FCS level quarterback. So is the Kentucky transfer going to be able to be enough for UT Martin to legitimately win this game? Probably not. Oklahoma State should win, even if we did a vanilla version of the offense and defense, and even if we did play a significant number of backups throughout the entirety of the game. Cowboys should still win by 20 points, 17-ish at the minimum. That would be UT Martin keeping the game close. If Oklahoma State only wins by 14, 17 points, then that is largely going to be viewed as a disappointment. Now, of course, if we're doing that with a ton of backups and we're really not expanding the playbook, then I do think it comes with a little bit of a grain of salt. But they are looking for their 5th straight and 6th overall conference title under Coach Jason Simpson. So we can't take them lightly. And not to mention, this is going to be a new offense for us. It's going to be a new defense for us. There's going to be new play calls. Everything is different. So Jason Simpson is certainly going to have his guys ready, and he's going to do everything he can to put themselves in a position to have some success. Should it equal a loss for Oklahoma State? Not even close. Like, just physically, athletically, it shouldn't be a ridiculously close game. But they're good enough, historically speaking, to keep it close enough to make it at least somewhat interesting. Again, you go back and look at that Kansas State game, I would imagine coming out of halftime, they weren't exactly thrilled with their performance. But the fourth quarter kind of put the game so far out of reach that on the scoreboard, it did look like a massive, discrepancy between the talent levels. But realistically, it was close for almost 3 full quarters. David Taylor in Cowboy Wrestling is at this very moment, or in a matter of minutes, here in the next few minutes, is going to be taking on Team China. This is obviously a very big deal. Now, some people are a little upset that it wasn't announced publicly, but from what I've gathered, this is more of like a private event style of thing. But one interesting piece of this is it might give us a little bit of a glimpse into who are going to be some of the favored guys to start this upcoming season. This is the lineup against China. And no, I'm not going to announce the Chinese names because that would just be probably a disaster. But the heavyweight representation for Oklahoma State against Team China is Connor Doucette. Next, you have Ronnie Ramirez at 61 kilograms. Then you have Iowa State transfer Casey Swiderski at 74 kilograms. Then you have Cody Merrill, who's been waiting in the wings to get his opportunity at 92 kilograms. Penn State transfer Alex Facundo is going to be representing the Cowboys at 86 kilograms. And, of course, Silver High School's own D. Lockett will be representing the Cowboys at 79 kilograms. Pretty cool ordeal. And I do think this is something that'll allow David Taylor and Oklahoma State to kind of separate themselves from some of the competition. And thankfully, the schedule's been released as well. The home schedule is Iowa. That is huge, right? That is an absolutely massive ordeal to have Iowa coming back to Stillwater, America. Iowa State also has to come to Stillwater, Oklahoma. Arkansas, Little Rock is coming to Galgariba. So is Northern Iowa. OU, which I thought I'd heard that they did not want to wrestle ever again in Stillwater. Turns out that wasn't exactly it. It was just that they only wanted to wrestle once. It wasn't necessarily location that was a big problem. It was the fact that they just do not want to wrestle Oklahoma State twice a year, which I get it, right? They're trying to rebuild, but the university is not exactly helping them rebuild. So I wouldn't want to wrestle us twice a year either. Thankfully, we do get a Bedlam in Galgariba Arena. Then we have Stanford, followed by Utah Valley. That is the home schedule. Why Stanford? Like, what is the appeal to Stanford? Why do we keep wrestling Stanford? They're not any good. I don't think they really have a history of being all that great. But whatever. So we do get Nebraska. And that's a big deal because obviously Nebraska finished second in the country this previous season, below Penn State and above Oklahoma State. Nebraska was the team that kind of snuck up on everybody and kind of came out of nowhere. You saw that in the Big Ten championships as well. They were able to creep up. They were able to capitalize in the transfer portal. Yes, they stooped so low to pick up AJ, the campus creeper himself, Ferrari. But nonetheless, the Cowboys get to take on Air Force, Arizona State, Iowa State, Arkansas, Little Rock, Mizzou, Nebraska, Northern Iowa, OU, Stanford, Utah Valley, Virginia Tech, and West Virginia. Arizona State, we did still Richard Figueroa, which is a little disappointing for them. We need Arizona State to get back to what they used to be in wrestling. It's just good for the Big 12. It's good for Oklahoma State. It's good for national appeal. Iowa, love the fact they're coming to Stillwater. Iowa State as well. Arkansas, Little Rock. They're going to be good again. They did lose two of their top three wrestlers, but they still got a Cowboy at the helm, and they got robbed of a conference championship last year. Instead of giving it to the Oklahoma State Cowboy alum, Arkansas Little Rock coach, they gave it to another Oklahoma State Cowboy alum at Oregon State. Arkansas Little Rock won the conference. Let's not sit here and pretend otherwise, but they did kind of give it to Oregon State, which is good for us to some degree, I guess. And then you have Mizzou. Mizzou typically is very good. Matter of fact, they did beat us a couple of years ago. Northern Iowa, they were very, very good last year. I feel a lot stronger about this matchup because we did steal Lee Roper from Northern Iowa and Rebecca Roper to come over. From a developmental aspect and getting some of the guys ready, Lee Roper was instrumental in the success that you and I had. Now, they are returning the conference coach of the year, but they're probably not going to be quite to the same level. Hopefully, OU just provides some semblance of a test. Stanford's not going to. I don't even know why that's on the schedule. Utah Valley is probably better than Stanford. Virginia Tech had some dudes at nationals kind of make some crazy things happen. So if you allow Virginia Tech to keep it close, it could get interesting. Same could be said about West Virginia. So I like this schedule. I like the duel. I don't understand why Stanford's on there. It must have been an agreement previously with John Smith before David Taylor. Hopefully David Taylor finds a way to get that crap fest out of the schedule. We don't need Stanford on the schedule. We don't want Stanford on the schedule. They do nothing but basically allow us to wrestle down. And maybe that's it. This is our SEC move, right? To have a weak opponent towards the latter half of the schedule to kind of give some dudes a break. Maybe that's what it is. And if that's the case, then sure, I guess keep it in. But I'd rather step it up a bit. I think David Taylor would as well. This sets up for some epic battles. Iowa State, Nebraska. Those are big. Those are big time moments and opportunities for Oklahoma State wrestling this upcoming season. So is this duel right now that's going on against Team China. So get with the Low Single or Cowboy RTC on Twitter. They're going to be sending updates and things of that nature throughout the course of the day. Again, this is a private event, so it's not going to be live streamed or publicized on TV or anything to that effect. I'm assuming that you got to be like a Daniel Cormier level dude to be part of this private viewing. I don't know if that's a financial thing or they're just trying to, help kind of prop up the U17 Greco-Roman stuff that's about to be taking place. But nonetheless, exciting times for David Taylor, Cowboy wrestling. You don't see Iowa, Nebraska, or Penn State out here wrestling other countries. So I think this is a pretty phenomenal deal. I'm glad that Oklahoma State is doing this. I think that it's something that we should continue to do. It would have been kind of cool to see Rin Sakamoto in here. I know he's Japanese, but nonetheless, just, it would have been kind of fun. Nonetheless, it's exciting times. Anywho, that's all we're going to have for this one right here. As always, I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here in Locked On Oklahoma State. You could be anywhere. So happy you choose to be here. Do me a favor, hit the like button if you liked it, dislike if you didn't. That's okay too. More importantly, share, comment, and subscribe. My podcast people out there, you know what to do. You know what you are. You make all of this work. I appreciate what you do. So do what you do. Go hit some stars. Go leave some reviews and have some fun with it. All right, y'all. You know the drill. Later, my taters.